The stars above the imperial capital burned with 1,000 colors. For 8,000 years, the Galactic Empire had ruled nearly half the known galaxy. Entire civilizations rose and fell beneath its banners. Species that once dreamed of freedom now proudly served the Empire's endless machine. And in all that time, the Empire had never lost a war. Not once. Not a single campaign. Not a single battle that truly mattered. Inside the massive Hall of Conquest, a chamber so large that warships could fly through its central corridor, the Empire's highest leaders gathered around a glowing holographic map of the galaxy. Golden light stretched across thousands of star systems. Each light represented a conquered world. Each world represented victory. At the center of the chamber stood Grand Emperor Vorton III, ruler of trillions. His silver eyes studied a newly highlighted region near the outer frontier. A small cluster of stars glowed blue. The territory of a newly discovered species. Humans. The room remained silent as Supreme Admiral Kaler stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said confidently, "our scouts have completed their survey." The hologram expanded. Dozens of unfamiliar human worlds appeared. Industrial colonies. Mining systems. Military outposts. Trade routes. Nothing particularly impressive. A few council members chuckled. One elderly governor folded his arms. "This is the species causing concern." Several others nodded in agreement. Compared to the Empire, humanity looked insignificant. Their territory occupied less than 1% of imperial space. Their population was tiny. Their fleets appeared limited. On paper, they were barely worth noticing. Admiral Kaler smiled. "Our projections estimate complete annexation within 6 standard weeks." The chamber erupted into approving murmurs. Another routine conquest. Another species joining the Empire. Nothing more. Yet one figure remained silent. Chief Intelligence Director Saran. His eyes never left the hologram. The Emperor noticed. "You disagree?" Saran hesitated. That alone caused the room to quiet. The intelligence chief was not known for uncertainty. "There is an anomaly." The hologram shifted again. Rows of intercepted human military records appeared. Fleet registries. Command structures. Deployment logs. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Then Saran enlarged several sections. The room frowned. Something wasn't right. According to the records, humanity possessed dozens of fleet groups. But Imperial scouts had only identified a fraction of them. Entire military branches existed on paper but had never been observed. Fleet commands listed thousands of vessels that seemingly didn't exist. Even stranger. Several classifications remained completely inaccessible. No ship images. No personnel records. No construction data. Nothing. Only names. The chamber grew uneasy. Admiral Kaler scoffed. "Propaganda." Several officials nodded. Many young civilizations exaggerated military strength. It wasn't unusual. But Saran didn't look convinced. "We considered that possibility." He pressed another command. More files appeared. Our infiltrators discovered references across multiple independent networks. The room leaned closer. One title appeared repeatedly. Again. And again. And again. Strategic Reserve Alpha. Nobody knew what it meant. The files contained no explanation. Only authorization warnings. Entire databases were locked behind security systems unlike anything Imperial intelligence had encountered before. A governor laughed nervously. "A hidden reserve force?" Another shrugged. "Every species keeps secrets." Yet Saran's expression darkened. "It gets worse." The chamber fell silent. He revealed one final report. A transmission intercepted from a human military officer months earlier. The message was brief. Only one sentence. The room read it together. And for the first time that day, nobody laughed. If the Empire attacks now, do not recall the main forces. Border Command can handle it. Silence. The words echoed through the enormous chamber. Border Command. Not the main forces. Not reinforcements. Not reserves. Border Command. A cold feeling settled over the room. Because every military officer present understood exactly what that meant. Those were the troops humanity stationed on the edge of its territory. The soldiers considered least important. The fleets assigned to routine patrol duty. Grand Emperor Vorton narrowed his eyes. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then Admiral Kaler finally broke the silence. Prepare the invasion. The hologram shifted. 10,000 Imperial warships assembled across the frontier. Golden fleet stretching from star to star. An unstoppable force. A force that had crushed every civilization in galactic history. Far away, on the edge of human space, warning beacons suddenly activated. Emergency messages raced through the darkness. And somewhere beyond the frontier, someone received them. Someone humanity had not contacted in a very long time. 10,000 warships. That was the number displayed on every Imperial tactical screen as the invasion fleet crossed into human space. 10,000 warships. Enough firepower to erase entire civilizations. Enough to make most species surrender without a fight. As Admiral Kaler stood on the command deck of the Imperial flagship Eternal Dominion, he felt no excitement. No tension. No uncertainty. Only confidence. Because history had already written the ending. Humanity simply hadn't realized it yet. Fleet formation complete, an officer reported. Outside the massive observation window, space itself seemed filled with gold. Battleships stretched across millions of kilometers. Carriers launched endless swarms of fighters. Titan-class dreadnoughts advanced like moving continents. The Imperial war machine was beautiful. Terrifying. Unstoppable. Ahead of them floated their destination. The human frontier system of New Carthage. The first world that would fall. The first lesson humanity would learn. Kaler smiled. Open communications. Moments later, the face of a human officer appeared on the main display. She looked calm. Far too calm. Behind her, alarms flashed red. Military personnel rushed through corridors. The Empire's largest invasion force in centuries had arrived. Yet she showed no fear. Kaler found that irritating. You are surrounded by the Imperial fleet. The human officer nodded. We noticed. Several officers on the bridge exchanged confused looks. Kaler continued. Surrender immediately and your population will be spared unnecessary suffering. The woman glanced away briefly, as though reading another report. Then she looked back. Sorry. Kaler frowned. Sorry. She sighed. Your timing is terrible. Silence. For a moment, nobody understood what she meant. What? The human officer rubbed her forehead. It's just, we're dealing with something else right now. The bridge fell completely silent. Kaler stared. Had she just implied the largest invasion fleet in Imperial history was an inconvenience? The woman received another message off-screen. Her expression brightened slightly. Oh. Good. Good. Kaler demanded. She looked directly into the camera. The evacuation is ahead of schedule. Then the transmission ended. The screen went black. For several seconds, nobody spoke. What was that? One officer whispered. Kaler felt irritation rising. Arrogance. Nothing more. Humanity was attempting to appear confident. A common tactic among weaker species. Proceed with Phase 1. Across the system, thousands of Imperial weapons powered up. The darkness filled with crimson light. Targeting systems locked onto orbital defenses. Missile platforms. Defense satellites. Space stations. Everything protecting New Carthage. Then the attack began. The first wave struck with devastating precision. Explosions bloomed across orbit. Entire defense platforms vanished in fire. Shockwaves rippled through space. Imperial officers watched the destruction with satisfaction. Exactly as expected. Then something strange happened. No return fire came. No desperate counterattack. No emergency broadcasts. Nothing. The human defenses simply endured. Kaler narrowed his eyes. Report. A tactical officer checked his display. Targets destroyed as ordered. Then why aren't they responding? Nobody had an answer. The silence felt wrong. Unnatural. As though the humans weren't defending themselves. As though they were waiting. Suddenly alarms erupted across the bridge. A communications officer stood. Admiral, we're intercepting human military traffic. Display it. Hundreds of transmissions appeared. Kaler expected panic. Instead, he found confusion. Human commanders weren't discussing the invasion. They were discussing logistics. Evacuation routes. Supply transfers. Civilian transport schedules. Almost nobody was talking about the Imperial fleet. The realization unsettled him. It was as if humanity had already accepted the battle. As if the outcome wasn't their primary concern. Then a new signal appeared. Encrypted. Classified. The Imperial decryption systems worked furiously. Seconds later, the message appeared. One sentence. Every officer on the bridge read it. And every officer felt the same chill. Border Command authorized to engage. Main force recall remains denied. The room fell silent. Denied. Not unavailable. Not delayed. Denied. Someone in human space had intentionally chosen not to summon additional forces. Not while facing 10,000 Imperial warships. Kaler clenched his jaw. For the first time since entering the system, uncertainty crept into his thoughts. Then another alarm sounded. This one far more urgent. A sensor officer suddenly stood. His face had gone pale. Admiral. What is it? The officer swallowed hard. Long-range scanners are detecting vessel launches. Kaler frowned. From the planet? No, sir. The officer's voice trembled. The bridge became deathly quiet. Then where? The sensor display zoomed outward. Far beyond New Carthage. Far beyond the system's outer defenses. Deep within the darkness between stars. Thousands of signals suddenly appeared. One after another. Then hundreds more. Then thousands. The officer looked up slowly. I don't think those ships were here before. And somewhere in the cold darkness beyond the frontier, an unseen fleet began moving toward the battlefield. The sensor officer checked his readings 3 times. Then a 4th. Then a 5th. Each scan returned the same impossible result. The ships were real. A cold silence settled over the bridge of the Eternal Dominion as thousands of unidentified contacts continued appearing across the tactical display. One by one. Then dozens at a time. Then hundreds. Like stars being born in the darkness. Admiral Kaler stared at the screen. How many? The officer swallowed. Current estimate. His voice faltered. 3,000 vessels. Murmurs spread across the bridge. 3,000 warships hidden beyond the frontier. Impossible. No civilization could conceal a fleet of that size. The logistics alone would have been detected years ago. Yet there they were, moving silently through deep space. As if they had been waiting. Watching. Preparing. Identify ship classes. The officer worked furiously. Seconds later, confusion appeared on his face. Unknown. Kaler frowned. What do you mean unknown? We can't match them to any human fleet registry. That made no sense. The Empire possessed detailed intelligence on every known human military branch. At least, they thought they did. The tactical screen zoomed closer. Images from long-range probes began streaming in. The bridge fell silent. The ships looked old. Not damaged. Old. Their hulls carried scars that spoke of countless battles. Layers of armor had been repaired and replaced so many times that no two vessels looked exactly alike. Some sections appeared centuries newer than others. Others looked ancient enough to belong in a museum. Yet despite their age, every ship moved with perfect precision. Like predators awakening from sleep. Kaler felt an unfamiliar sensation crawling down his spine. Unease. Then a new transmission arrived. Not from the planet. From the approaching fleet. The signal was unencrypted. Open. Intentional. The bridge speakers crackled. A calm human voice filled the room. Imperial Fleet. This is Border Command Group 1. The room froze. Border Command. The same name from the intercepted message. The voice continued. You have entered sovereign Terran territory. No threats. No anger. No fear. Just simple certainty. You are ordered to withdraw immediately. Several Imperial officers laughed. 3,000 ships were impressive. But they still faced more than 10,000 Imperial warships. The outcome remained obvious. Admiral Kaler stepped forward. You are outnumbered. For several seconds, no response came. Then the human voice returned. And somehow, it sounded amused. We know. The transmission ended. Nothing more. No speech. No warning. Just those two words. We know. A strange tension settled over the bridge. Because the humans genuinely didn't seem concerned. Not even now. Suddenly another officer shouted. Admiral. Intelligence update from Imperial Command. A new report appeared. Freshly decrypted. Recently intercepted. Classified human communications. The room quickly scanned the document. Then the atmosphere changed. Several officers visibly paled. The report contained references to Border Command. Thousands of references. Decades worth. Patrol routes. Deployment schedules. Maintenance records. Combat exercises. The deeper analysts dug, the worse it became. Because Border Command wasn't a fleet. It was an organization. A massive one. Containing dozens of fleet groups. Possibly hundreds. The approaching force represented only Group 1. Nothing more. Nothing less. A single group. The realization hit the bridge like a physical blow. If this was merely Group 1, how many others existed? Before anyone could answer, alarms exploded throughout the command deck. Red warning lights flashed. Sensor stations lit up simultaneously. Admiral. Another officer stood. This time his face had turned completely white. What now? The officer pointed toward the main display. The room looked. And horror spread through the bridge. Beyond the incoming fleet. Even farther into deep space. New contacts had appeared. Thousands of them. Again. The tactical display struggled to process the numbers. Entire sectors of space suddenly filled with signals. The sensor officer's voice trembled. "We're detecting additional formations." Kaler's stomach tightened. "How many?" The answer came barely above a whisper. "At least 4 more fleet groups." Silence. Absolute silence. 5 groups. And only one had reached the battlefield. Then another intercepted human transmission appeared. A routine message. Not classified. Not encrypted. Just ordinary communication between commanders. Yet its contents made every Imperial officer stare in disbelief. Border Command Groups 1 through 5 have arrived. Remaining groups are still 2 days out. 2 days out. The words echoed through the bridge. Because for the first time since entering human space, the Galactic Empire began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. And deep within the darkness beyond the frontier, something much larger than Border Command was already awakening. The first Imperial warship exploded without warning. One moment, the cruiser Valorous Dawn was advancing in formation. The next, it vanished. No missile strike. No energy beam. No collision. 1 second it existed. The next, it was nothing more than a rapidly expanding cloud of molten metal. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion erupted into chaos. "Report." Admiral Kaler's voice thundered across the command deck. Sensor officers scrambled through data streams. Weapons analysts checked targeting logs. Nobody understood what had happened. Then another ship disappeared. And another. And another. Each loss occurred exactly the same way. No visible attack. No detectable weapon signature. Just sudden destruction. A cold knot tightened in Kaler's stomach. For the first time in his military career, he was witnessing a weapon the Empire couldn't explain. Outside the observation window, the battlefield had transformed into madness. Thousands of Imperial ships exchanged fire with Border Command formations. Brilliant streams of plasma illuminated the darkness. Explosions flashed like newborn stars. Entire sections of space burned with war. Yet something felt wrong. The human fleet wasn't fighting like any military Kaler had encountered before. They weren't defending positions. They weren't holding territory. They weren't even attempting traditional battle formations. Instead, they moved like hunters. Every human vessel operated independently, weaving through combat zones with frightening precision. Small groups would appear unexpectedly, strike vulnerable targets, and disappear before Imperial forces could react. Again. And again. And again. As if they already knew where every Imperial ship would be. A tactical officer suddenly gasped. "Admiral, look at this." A holographic replay appeared. The room watched carefully. One of the mysterious human destroyers emerged briefly near an Imperial cruiser. For less than half a second. Then it vanished. Moments later, the cruiser exploded. The replay zoomed in further. Silence spread across the bridge. Because the human ship hadn't traveled through normal space. It had folded space itself. A maneuver considered impossible. The vessel essentially skipped reality. Appearing wherever it wanted. Ignoring distance entirely. Several officers stared in disbelief. The technology violated fundamental laws of known physics. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The humans were doing it. And doing it repeatedly. Then another message arrived from Imperial intelligence. Priority 1. Kaler opened it immediately. The report originated from deep infiltration teams operating inside human communication networks. Most of the information remained fragmented. Incomplete. But one discovery stood out. A single intercepted transmission. The room read it together. Notify Strategic Reserve Alpha. The Empire has finally arrived. Silence. Once again, that name. Strategic Reserve Alpha. The mysterious organization hidden behind every classified barrier. The force mentioned repeatedly throughout human military records. Yet this report included something new. A note attached by Imperial analysts. Kaler's blood ran cold as he read it. Human commanders are displaying signs of anxiety whenever Strategic Reserve Alpha is referenced. Anxiety. Not confidence. Not pride. Fear. The bridge exchanged uneasy glances. Why would military officers fear their own reserve forces? What exactly was Strategic Reserve Alpha? Before anyone could answer, another alarm erupted. Far stronger than the previous ones. The tactical display suddenly zoomed outward. Beyond New Carthage. Beyond the battle. Beyond even the approaching border command reinforcements. Something enormous had appeared. The sensors struggled to calculate its size. At first, officers assumed it was a malfunction. The readings were absurd. Impossible. Then visual confirmation arrived. The image appeared on the main screen. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. The object emerging from hyperspace was so large that several officers initially mistook it for a moon. Its metallic surface stretched across hundreds of kilometers. Countless weapons lined its hull. Entire fleets could have docked inside it. And according to the identification signal, it wasn't a battleship. It wasn't a carrier. It wasn't even classified as a warship. The designation flashed across every screen on the bridge. Strategic Reserve Alpha. Then a second signal appeared. Followed by a third. Then a fourth. One by one, colossal shapes emerged from hyperspace behind the first. The darkness itself seemed to split apart. Kaler stared at the growing formation. His confidence evaporating with every passing second. Because those weren't ships arriving. They were something else. Something the Empire had never encountered before. And as millions of sensors struggled to process the impossible sight, a new message arrived from humanity. This time directed to every Imperial vessel in the system. The transmission contained only 7 words. You should have left when asked. The giant object didn't fire a single weapon. It didn't launch fighters. It didn't broadcast threats. It simply arrived. And somehow, that was far more terrifying. Across the battlefield, the fighting slowed. Not because either side had ordered a ceasefire. But because thousands of crews, human and Imperial alike, found themselves staring at the enormous structure hanging in the darkness. Strategic Reserve Alpha. The name that had haunted Imperial intelligence for months. The name hidden behind every classified firewall. The name that even human officers seemed reluctant to discuss. Now it was here. And nobody knew what it was. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Kaler watched as sensor teams desperately analyzed the massive object. The reports made less sense with every update. Energy output. Unknown. Primary weapons. Unknown. Crew complement. Unknown. Kaler clenched his jaw. How can everything be unknown? The officer looked pale. Because, sir, we can't find anything. The bridge fell silent. The structure possessed almost no detectable emissions. No obvious engines. No visible shield generators. No identifiable command sections. It was as if the object had been designed specifically to hide its true purpose. Then the first Imperial battleship fired. Nobody knew who gave the order. Perhaps a nervous captain. Perhaps someone hoping to prove the giant construct wasn't invincible. A brilliant beam of plasma crossed space. The attack struck Strategic Reserve Alpha directly. The battlefield held its breath. The beam vanished. Not deflected. Not absorbed. Vanished. as though reality itself had swallowed it. Several Imperial officers blinked, certain they had imagined it. Then dozens more ships opened fire. Thousands of weapons unleashed their fury. The darkness lit up like a newborn star. When the light faded, Strategic Reserve Alpha remained exactly where it had been. Untouched. Not a scratch marked its surface. Not a single visible response. And somehow, that silence felt worse than retaliation. Far worse. Because it suggested the Empire wasn't a threat worth acknowledging. Suddenly, an urgent transmission arrived from Imperial Intelligence Command. Priority Omega. The highest classification in the Empire. Kaler opened it immediately. The report originated from a covert operation deep inside human territory. For months, Imperial agents had been searching for answers. Now they had finally found something. A hidden archive. Buried beneath one of humanity's oldest military complexes on Earth. The data recovered was incomplete. Much of it remained encrypted. But one section had survived. Ancient records. Thousands of years old. The bridge became deathly quiet as the translated files appeared. Strategic Reserve Project. Purpose: Galactic Containment Operations. Primary mission: maintain defensive readiness against extragalactic threats. Secondary mission: preservation of galactic civilization. The room stared. Nobody spoke. Kaler frowned. Extragalactic threats. An intelligence officer nodded uncertainly. Threats from outside the galaxy. The word sounded absurd. No known civilization existed beyond the galactic rim. The void between galaxies was vast. Empty. Dead. Or at least, that was what everyone believed. The archive continued. Threat assessment. Containment failure probability, rising. Civilian disclosure status, restricted. Imperial-level civilizations, insufficient for response. Recommended action, expansion of strategic reserve assets. The bridge grew colder. Imperial-level civilizations. Plural. The report wasn't discussing humanity alone. It was evaluating entire galactic powers. And according to the document, none of them were enough. Then came the final surviving file. The oldest one. A recording. Its timestamp dated back nearly 4,000 years. A human officer appeared on screen. The uniform looked ancient. The man's expression looked exhausted. Behind him, warning lights flashed red. Distant alarms echoed through the recording. The officer spoke only one sentence. One sentence that drained the color from every face on the bridge. If you're watching this, then containment is failing again. Again. The word struck harder than anything else. Again. Not for the first time. Not a future possibility. Again. As though humanity had already fought whatever lay beyond the galaxy. As though they had survived. Barely. Before anyone could process the implication, alarms suddenly erupted across every Imperial vessel. The tactical display changed. New contacts had appeared. Far beyond Strategic Reserve Alpha. Far beyond the battlefield. At the very edge of sensor range. Thousands of them. No. Not thousands. Millions. The computer struggled to count. Signal after signal flooded the display. An endless tide emerging from the darkness between galaxies. The bridge fell silent. Then a transmission arrived from Strategic Reserve Alpha itself. For the first time since its arrival. A calm human voice spoke. And for the first time. The voice sounded worried. All units. Containment Zone 7 has gone dark. A pause. Then 3 words that froze the blood of everyone listening. Prepare for contact. For a long moment. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Across thousands of Imperial ships, bridge crews sat frozen in silence as the words echoed through their speakers. Containment Zone 7 has gone dark. Not destroyed. Not under attack. Gone dark. As if an entire region of space had simply stopped answering. Then came the second message. Prepare for contact. The fear in the human commander's voice disturbed Admiral Kaler more than the warning itself. Because this was humanity. The species that had calmly faced 10,000 Imperial warships. The species that treated invasion fleets like minor inconveniences. The species that had hidden unimaginable military power throughout the frontier. And yet, they were afraid. That realization settled over the battlefield like a shadow. Something existed out there. Something capable of frightening the people who built Strategic Reserve Alpha. And it was coming. Fast. Magnify the contacts. Kaler's voice sounded strangely distant. The main display obeyed. At first, the officers thought the sensors were malfunctioning. The approaching signals formed a solid wall across intergalactic space. Millions of contacts. Stretching beyond the limits of every display. The tactical computer couldn't even estimate their total numbers. It simply displayed. Count unknown. A chill spread across the bridge. Empires measured fleets in thousands. Civilizations measured them in millions. But this looked endless. Then the first visual feed arrived. And the room immediately wished it hadn't. The image appeared grainy. Distorted by the vast distance. Yet everyone could see the object clearly. It wasn't a ship. At least not in any recognizable sense. The thing resembled a fractured moon stitched together with jagged metallic growths. Its surface twisted unnaturally. Massive sections appeared alive. Moving. Breathing. Several officers instinctively recoiled. The object radiated wrongness. The kind of sight that made the mind struggle to process what it was seeing. Then another image arrived. And another. Every contact looked different. Some resembled shattered planets wrapped in black structures. Others appeared like colossal skeletal organisms drifting through the void. One looked disturbingly similar to a giant eye. An eye the size of a continent. Watching. Waiting. The bridge fell silent. Even veteran officers who had fought for centuries stared in horror. What are they? Someone whispered. Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Suddenly, a transmission arrived from Strategic Reserve Alpha. This time it wasn't public. Only high-ranking military channels received it. Kaler listened carefully. The human commander spoke with calm professionalism. But beneath it, the strain was obvious. Attention all Allied and non-Allied forces. A brief pause followed. Then. Everything beyond this point is classified under Terran emergency protocols. Several Imperial officers exchanged confused looks. Allied and non-Allied? Humanity wasn't even distinguishing enemies anymore. The voice continued. If the containment network has failed, then the entities approaching this galaxy are likely aware of our location. The bridge grew colder. Entities. Not fleets. Not civilizations. Entities. The wording felt deliberate. Uncomfortable. Then came the sentence that changed everything. The Galactic Empire is advised to retreat immediately. Kaler blinked. Retreat? The Empire still possessed thousands of warships. Humanity had every advantage. Why retreat? Then the commander explained. And the answer shattered every remaining illusion. You are no longer the target. Silence. Absolute silence. Because for the first time since entering human space, the Empire understood something horrifying. The war was over. Humanity no longer cared about the invasion. Humanity no longer cared about territorial disputes. Humanity no longer cared about the Empire at all. Something far worse had arrived. And suddenly, everyone was in danger. Then alarms erupted throughout Strategic Reserve Alpha. The giant construct finally moved. Massive sections of its hull unfolded. Ancient mechanisms awakened. Entire layers of armor shifted aside. The structure transformed before the eyes of millions. What emerged beneath left every observer speechless. Weapons. Thousands upon thousands of weapons. Some larger than Imperial battleships. Others stretching hundreds of kilometers. Systems built for wars beyond imagination. Wars against enemies no civilization should ever meet. And Strategic Reserve Alpha wasn't alone. Across the darkness, more colossal structures emerged from hyperspace. 10. 20. 50. Hundreds. An entire armada of ancient guardians answering a call they had not received in centuries. Then a final transmission appeared on every screen. The sender identification froze the blood of every human commander. Containment Zone 7. For 3 terrifying seconds, nobody breathed. The zone was supposed to be silent. Destroyed. Gone. Yet somehow, it was transmitting. The message contained only 4 words. 4 words that made even humanity's veterans go pale. They're inside the galaxy. The message did not repeat. It did not need to. They're inside the galaxy. Across every Imperial vessel, across human border command channels, across Strategic Reserve Alpha itself, silence collapsed into chaos. Then immediately into something worse. Understanding. Admiral Kaler stood motionless as alarms screamed around him. Tactical displays flickered violently, struggling to process incoming data streams that now had no pattern, no structure, no logic that Imperial systems could recognize. The enemy was not approaching anymore. They were everywhere. Sensor officers shouted over each other. Contacts inside the inner frontier. 3 systems compromised. Unknown structures forming in orbit. Those aren't ships, they're appearing. Kaler forced himself to look at the main display. At first, he saw nothing. Then the darkness between stars began to change. Space itself rippled like disturbed water. And something began to emerge. Not from hyperspace. Not from known FTL corridors. From somewhere else. A jagged structure unfolded in orbit of a distant human colony world. It did not arrive as a ship would arrive. It grew into existence, as though reality itself was being rewritten around it. Then another appeared in a dead system. Then 5 more. Then hundreds. Human border command formations immediately began repositioning, but their movements were no longer confident. For the first time, their precision faltered. Because they were not hunting an invading fleet anymore. They were reacting to an infection. A voice cut through all channels. Strategic Reserve Alpha. This time, it carried no calm. Only urgency. All Terran forces. Full activation protocols are now authorized. A pause. Then the part that made even Imperial officers realize something had changed inside humanity itself. Containment has failed on a galactic scale. Kaler's throat tightened. What does that mean? Someone whispered. No one answered. Because suddenly, they understood the implications too well. These were not invaders trying to conquer systems. They were not even an empire. They were something worse. Something that had been locked away. Across the battlefield, Strategic Reserve Alpha began to unfold further. Entire sections of its impossible structure rotated, revealing layers upon layers of hidden armaments. Weapons older than the Empire itself came online, each one humming with restrained power. But even that was not the most frightening change. Because humanity's fleets were changing too. Border commands stopped retreating. They stopped repositioning. They stopped reacting. Instead, every human ship began to converge. Not toward the enemy. Toward specific coordinates across the galaxy. Kaler watched the pattern form. And realized with growing dread that humanity was not defending borders anymore. They were sealing something. Containing something. Fighting a war that had already been ongoing long before the Empire ever existed. A new transmission arrived, this time from a human commander stationed aboard Strategic Reserve Alpha. His voice was strained. Not from fear of the Empire. But from exhaustion. Like someone who had repeated the same battle for far too long. The breach points are stabilizing, but expanding. A pause. Then the sentence that made every listener go cold. We are losing ground faster than projected. Kaler's eyes widened. Humanity was losing. Not to the Empire. Not to Border Command's unknown enemies. But to something beyond even that. The display shifted again. New visuals streamed in from deep reconnaissance drones. Entire star systems were being overridden. Planets were not being destroyed. They were being replaced. Structures formed where no structures should exist. Organisms the size of moons drifted through inhabited space, absorbing light, reshaping gravity, rewriting matter itself. One Imperial officer finally broke. What are they trying to do? A human scientist's transmission answered. Cold. Simple. Final. They are not trying to conquer the galaxy. A pause. Then. They are trying to wake it up. And at that exact moment, Strategic Reserve Alpha detected a final signal. Origin, unknown. Direction, everywhere. Content, a single word repeating across every frequency. Not human. Not imperial. Not anything known to galactic science. Just one word. Return. The galaxy itself seemed to listen. And for the first time, it answered. The word return did not echo through space. It replaced it. Every frequency. Every channel. Every sensor array across human and imperial fleets suddenly carried the same signal, as if the universe itself had been overridden. Return. 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 Then silence. Not absence of sound, but absence of normality. Physics felt wrong. Light bent in ways it shouldn't. Distance stopped behaving consistently. Even Imperial navigation computers began to drift off calibration, as if reality no longer trusted their measurements. Admiral Kaler stared at the main display. Strategic Reserve Alpha was no longer just a structure. It had become a focal point. A point where space seemed thinner. Like something on the other side was pressing against it. Hard. Human border command fleets were no longer moving as independent units. They had formed a vast lattice around key systems, tightening, synchronizing, aligning. Not for battle. For containment. Kaler finally understood. They were never defending against us, he whispered. A communications officer looked at him. Sir. Kaler's voice cracked slightly. They were holding something in. A new alarm screamed across the bridge. But this time, it wasn't Imperial systems detecting an enemy fleet. It was Strategic Reserve Alpha broadcasting a galaxy-wide emergency lock. The massive construct unfolded further. Layer after layer of hidden architecture rotated into view. Entire sections that had looked like armor now separated into complex geometric arrays, forming a structure that resembled a cage built around empty space itself. And then the truth became visible. Not metaphorically. Literally. Space inside the Alpha construct distorted, revealing something sealed beneath layers of engineered reality. Something that did not belong in any known dimension. A shape. Impossible to define. It was not matter. It was not energy. It was presence. And it was pressing outward. A human commander's voice returned, strained, urgent, breaking for the first time. All containment nodes are failing simultaneously. A pause. Then. They were never meant to stay asleep this long. Across the battlefield, Imperial ships began to withdraw instinctively. No order was given. No command issued. Every instinct screamed the same thing. Get away. But there was nowhere left to go. Because the signals were now inside every system. Inside every ship. Inside every calculation of reality itself. Then it happened. Strategic Reserve Alpha activated its final protocol. A pulse spread outward, not of destruction, but of awakening resistance. Every human fleet simultaneously powered up systems that had never been seen before. Weapons that didn't fire energy or projectiles, but laws. Fields that stabilized collapsing space. Nodes that reinforced broken reality. And yet, it was not enough. The presence behind containment surged again. And this time, the barrier cracked. Not metaphorically. A visible fracture appeared in space above a distant dead system. Then another. Then dozens. From each crack, something began to emerge. Not ships. Not fleets. But forms that changed shape depending on who observed them. Some saw colossal beings made of fractured starlight. Others saw impossible mechanical gods. Others saw voids shaped like consciousness itself. All of them moved toward the galaxy with one purpose. Return. The human commander spoke one final time. Quietly now. Not to the Empire. Not to Border Command. But to every human fleet in existence. This is it. A pause. Then the last admission humanity had carried for millennia. We held them back once, but we were never meant to win forever. Strategic Reserve Alpha began collapsing inward, reconfiguring itself into something final. A seal. A lock. A last desperate attempt to delay what was coming. Admiral Kaler's voice was barely audible. What happens when it fully returns? No one answered. Because every human officer already knew. And none of them wanted to say it aloud. Then the final transmission arrived. Not from humanity. Not from Strategic Reserve Alpha. But from the cracks themselves. A chorus of countless voices speaking as one. The gate is ours again. And the galaxy awoke.